Hi, good morning, everyone. So, I have just a small update. I have changed the directory structure of my repository, which I have given to you. What I've done is like all the Kubernetes concepts, the YAML files, the README files, and everything related to Kubernetes has shifted into this particular directory. Rest of the directory structure is the same, but only few things I am doing slight modifications or topic wise, which will comes under first topic, second topic, and all. And those topics wise, I'm trying to create a directory and I'm pushing all the YAML files to that particular location. That's the only thing which we are trying to do actually. Okay, nothing more than that. So yeah. That's it. So let me remove these actually. I think it has created some duplicate entries. Yeah. Okay, I will do that. So under Kubernetes, you have a pod section. So under this pod section, I have written all the YAML files, all the example YAML files, which are important for uh, pod related topics. Okay. So I think in the previous class we have seen how to create a pod, multi-pod, multi-container pod, init container pod, and then we have seen different types of the pods and all. So now let us try to understand a bit about. We have seen how to deploy Jenkins pod as well, and we have seen how to what are the parameters we have to take into consideration. So those are the things which we have seen. Now I want to take one more example in pod concept that is called as downward API. So what is this downward API? What we can do with this particular concept? So here,
Sudeep, one
yeah,
second. One question
yeah,
before you go ahead. So
yeah.
actually, I have missed September 2nd class. I
Okay.
mean, so for which there was no recording.
That is related to pod introduction, right? You're
Yeah,
talking about.
so I mean, again, I tried to continue with the September 3rd, but unfortunately, I could not proceed without
Okay, okay.
getting.
So
Yeah.
that's a problem from my end. Recording was not happened due to this particular tool problem. Okay. So what I promised is I will be doing some video on Saturday, Sunday, but that could not happen. Today I
Oh,
will just record the video, whatever I have teached on that day. So I will just recall it and I will try to do all the video which I have done on that September 2nd. Okay.
okay.
Today I will upload for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Okay. So yeah. So coming to this particular topic, what is downward API? It also comes under volume section actually. So if you see the parameter which I have written is written under volume section. Okay, just a second. Why this is not happening? The location is must be volume problem. Okay, view problem. Okay, I see some red colors. Okay, this one I can fix it. Okay, it's a problem with the editors. Okay, and just we have to fix these kind of things. What is this? Huh. Okay. Now, here if you see, we are using downward API. What is the intention of using downward API is, if you want to pick the values from the YAML itself, from the YAML, or when you try to create let's say, I will just create a sample pod and then I can explain you more about this. Okay, so let me create one pod. So kubectl, I'm creating from CLI. Okay, so through CLI, let's see how to create a pod. Okay, kubectl run. Okay, and then we need to give a pod name. Let's say test hyphen pod. Okay, after this I want to give image name. Okay, so image is equal to nginx colon 1.19.0 or something, whatever it is. Okay, if I execute this, the container name and the pod name will be same, everything will be like almost equal. Okay, so this is a simple command to create a simple pod with a single container. Okay, with the image what I have specified, we can pass so many parameters, but here I just want to keep it simple to explain that particular downward API. That's the reason I did this. If you want to pass some parameters, okay, you can see here allow missing template keys, attach, cascade, commands, dry run. There are so many parameters here. Image pull policy, okay, labels, okay, and then we have written port, okay, what ports you want to expose, okay, restart policy. Everything was written with the different parameters. Here I have kept it simple in such a way that I just want to create a pod with a single container. Okay, I've done with CLI. Now, if I want to see this particular pod information, what is the general command we execute? kubectl. I want to see the pod information. Then you will execute kubectl get pod. Okay, so this is getting executed, and you can see one of the pod is got created, which have executed, right? kubectl test hyphen pod. Okay, this is the pod which I have created. Now if I want to see the description, means let's say I want to see the whole bunch of information of this particular pod. What is the UID? What is the name of this particular pod? In which namespace it is created? That particular section. What is the pod IP address? I want to see more information about this particular pod. So how to do that? kubectl get pod, pod name, test pod. I want to print the data of this particular pod in the format of YAML. Okay, so hyphen o YAML. If you give JSON, it will print in a JSON format. Okay, now let's execute. Okay, if I scroll up, you can see the entire information what it is stored in the etcd. I told you, right? Every object related information of your cluster will be stored in the etcd. Now that will be stored in the form of YAML or a JSON. Okay, so when etcd has stored this particular information, when I execute these kind of commands, this command or this command, it will print the data only what this command does. Okay, from where it will fetch the data? It will go and it will fetch the data from the etcd. Okay, now when I execute this command, the entire information of that particular pod will be printed in the YAML format. You can see your API version, kind, metadata, annotation. Did I give annotation? No, but these are the predefined, means automatically this will get added when you try to create. Some parameters are automatically populated, few parameters what we have given. Technically speaking, what parameters I gave? Only the image and the pod name, to be frank. Okay, this is the name I gave, and this is the image which I specified to assign the pod. Rest of the parameters, how you got these are assigned automatically. Okay, automatically these parameters will get populated. Now if I want to utilize this particular parameters into my container, let's say I want to pick the pod IP. Okay, for example, let's say pod IP. When you will get a pod IP, once it is created, right? Before I doesn't know what is a pod IP. Before the pod has been created, I cannot guess or I cannot tell something like what is a pod IP. Okay, but yes, we can tell what pod IP should be assigned. Let's say you can give your own choice, but it should be from the CIDR value. Okay, that is fine. But the problem is, once a pod is created, then only the pod IP address will be assigned to this particular pod. Now, when this particular things are happening dynamically, and one more point is, if this pod is recreated, what will happen? The IP address will change. That is one more situation, right? So when this IP address got changed, you cannot guarantee and you cannot go with the old IP address which was given in some particular location. Okay, let's say where I will utilize and all I will tell you. But for few parameters will change dynamically, so it has to pick automatically based on the changed means automatically from my pod related information. So why you need this information? For example, there is an application. Okay, in that application, you there is some particular configuration file where I need to update my container IP address or the pod IP address, since it is running on pod IP. Okay, so I want to do that. Let's say some blocking, some firewall, or in the configuration file, if I update that IP address, my application will accept the request on that particular IP address. So there could be some situations. So how I can update those details in the configuration file? How is that possible? I cannot hard code it because I cannot write a configuration file or I cannot write a Docker file in those scenarios and go and update my pod IP address estimating that okay, this will be the pod IP address. No, right? It cannot be done. Technically, it is not possible. Okay. Then what could be the another solution? Can I do while creating the pod? Okay, fine. You will hard code it or something. You will do it. But the problem is again, if the pod is recreated, the IP address is not constant. It is ephemeral IP. Ephemeral in the sense what? It is not constant. It it might change after the pod is recreated. So for these kind of scenarios, you cannot go with a fixed, or you cannot go with some what do you say, random IP address. So when the IP address is getting generated dynamically and if it is not constant, you have to rely in the concept called downward API. Let's say I want to update my pod IP address into this particular index.html. Okay, what I want to add, welcome to this particular container, something like that. I just want to add. So in those scenarios, how I can do? Okay, so what I can do is nothing but, you can see here, I have written, I want to update in this particular file, index.html, which means that when I curl this particular pod IP, obviously you will get the data what is present in the index.html. So what I want to print, I want to print my name of the pod. Okay, name of the pod. So how I can do that? Let's say here we have written the subpath, which means that I just want to update only index.html. Okay, so this is what I have written, subpath. Now in this volume section, name, instead of writing empty.dir, now I have written downward API. So in this downward API, let me try to give backspaces. Okay. Here also, now these are spaces. You can see volume is parallel to your containers. Okay, that's one thing you have to take care. And the name of the volume should be equal to the volume mount what you have written. Okay, then only this volume will get mounted to this particular directory inside the container, which you already know. Downward API items. Okay, which item you want to pick from the YAML path, index.html, which means that I want to update this index.html. Okay, field reference, field path. So field reference in the sense which field you want to pick. See, you can see only now this particular data, but after the pod is created, you'll have some bunch of information like this. Okay, if you doesn't know about this, you can just create one sample pod and you can get the information. Now you see, if I want a pod IP address, first I need to give status is a variable, parent variable. Under that you have pod IP. You can see here I have a pod IP here. So how I need to write it? Status dot, this is my parent variable, dot, and then pod IP. So this is what I can pick my pod IP address. Okay, this is how it is. Now let's say if I want to pick my name of the pod is nothing but it is under metadata. Under that I have a name. If I want to pick a namespace, then I need to give a parent variable called metadata. Under that, I need to give my namespace. If you want to pick something from this particular container section, your parent variable is spec. Under that, you have containers. Then you need to pick your resource or engine image or whatever you want. Okay. So this is what you have to understand. So you need to give your parent variable, sub variable, and your actual variable where it is, where your value has been stored. So always, whenever you do know something, just try to create a sample pod and see what are the informations that we can fetch into our downward API. Okay, those are called as field reference, and the field path is nothing but your actual data. How will you pick? Okay, here you can see we have written metadata dot name. Here I can pick metadata dot status dot pod IP. That pod IP will be added into this index.html. Okay, so that also could happen, right? So I can update some data into this particular YAML file. Okay, so which could really happen. Now, to be simplified, I have written this. Let me try to add this. So I have written this. So let us try to, if you want information of this as well, you can just search in Google, not in the Google, like I'm saying like official documentation. So kubernetes.io. Let's see like how it looks. How will you do in the examination? Kubernetes.io, go to the documentation. You can bookmark this in the examination. Okay. Let's say downward API. You got these examples. Okay. Expose pod information to container through files. This is the topic. Okay. How will you expose? Means the pod information you are collecting and you are trying to inject into the continuous, okay, using this particular concept. Okay, so scroll down, you will see some bunch of examples. Downward API items, you can pick different values and you can inject into. There are two ways. Either they are calling through what do you say? Uh, Technically, we call it as like environment variables, or they are trying to call it through what do you say? This one, volumes. Okay. So these are the ways we have in order to inject the data. Whatever information you want, you can just collect. Okay. It's not mandatory that you have to pick like this and like this. Okay, we can pick different kinds of data in different ways. I've written one or two three examples here so that we can understand that if you want to pick from metadata, how we need to call it. If you want to pick from status, how we need to pick it. And if we want to call it from the spec, how we need to pick it. Okay, so these are the details which I have written. Now this concept is simple. If I try to curl this particular pod IP, I need to get my name of the pod. Okay, so old data should get wiped out and this new data should get added into this. Okay, so let me copy paste this. Copy. Let's write pods and let's say downward API hyphen name. For example, it is okay. So here let me check the syntaxes, cross check once, items, path, field reference. Okay, I'm expecting this to be here and this to be okay, field reference. So downward API items, this is done. Let me cross check with my official documentation. Okay, you can see here downward API is here, items, path, field reference is parallel to your path, and then field path. Okay, you can see here items and the path. Okay, sometimes it is accepted to write here and some syntaxes doesn't accept this. Okay, so don't get confused. So let us try to create this. Okay, so save this file and come out. Now kubectl create -f pods downward API. It got created successfully, right? So now kubectl get pod. You can see the pod has been created, web server -over. Okay, so now if I curl this, okay, so I need to get a response called web server. That's it. Okay, so this is picked. Let's say in some scenarios actually the pod name will be like this. For example, I'm saying, though it is not related to the topic, I'm saying this pod name, you can see it is in different case. Why? Because this pod was created by someone, some particular entity, that is called as a deployment. I will tell you later, but this pod was created with that particular deployment. So the name of the pod is deployment name, and then after that it added some random number due to some other topic, and then after that it will add the random number for each and every pod. Until this it will be unique for a few pods actually. Okay, so these are three different deployments, but okay, if the deployment is same and you have created three pods, three replica pods, this will be different. So these names will be added like this random. Means when you delete the pod and if you recreate it, this pod name is not constant. It will change. Okay. In those scenarios, the parameter which I've told is useful for you. If this scenario, it's okay, fine. You can just hard code it because every time when you recreate, the pod name will be web server only. But here in this case, this random number generated at the last, right, this will change. How can I predict it? Before creating it, I cannot predict it, right, to hard code it. So in those scenarios, I have to go to the approach what I have shown in the example. Okay, this example which I've shown, right, this will be well suitable for those kind of scenarios. Okay, there will be some scenarios where we need to get the pod IP or the in which namespace it is created, your pod and all. This information is needed for your application. So when those information are needed for your application, we have to use a concept called downward API. Okay, so do remember this particular concept. You don't get any question from this particular topic in the examination, but just remember for your real-time scenarios. Okay, so this will be useful for those kind of scenarios. Okay, now next thing. So in this way, if you so this we are trying to pick it as environment variables. Okay, so what is environment variable? Let us try to discuss in pod. Environment variables, you already know, right? What are environment variables? The variables which will be loaded in the terminal when your session has been started. Okay, there could be variables which could be loaded when your actual shell script is running, or some Python script is running, or any script which you run in your Linux terminal. Okay, so those particular variables will go loaded, and the value will be stored in that particular variable for our script purpose, or for your terminal purpose to execute some particular commands or some particular scripts, whatever it is. Now in this way, I want to inject some data as an environment, and I want to inject some data into the container, and I want to store it in the form of environment variables. So in those scenarios, for containers, you need to write env, environment variables. Shortcut name is env. So you need to write name, which should be the variable name. How will you store? Generally, in Linux terminal, let me show you. I want to save my MySQL password in the environment variable. So then I will write MySQL underscore root underscore password is equal to, let's say, test123. Now this is my environment variable, this one, and the value is test123. Okay, now I executed this. So if I execute env, it will show all my environment variables which I have created in this particular terminal. Now it is not stored because you are not able to see, because we need to give export before this particular command. Okay, so let's try to give export. Done. Now if I execute env command, you can see your MySQL variable, this particular MySQL root password variable, and the value which is stored here. This might be useful for your application. Let's say in my scenario, the example for this is nothing but when you are installing MySQL, right, as a container. Generally, if you try to install MySQL, it will ask for passwords multiple two times. One is password creation, and one is for reconfirmation of your password. When you're deploying your MySQL as a pod, as a container, or as a pod, it doesn't ask you for a usernames, password, something like that. It doesn't prompt you anything. Okay, when those kinds of applications are getting deployed, they will try to look for environment variables so that they can take the value which you have stored there and assign as a password. Okay, now this is nothing but I'm trying to set a root password for my MySQL. Okay, so what will happen? So when my MySQL is getting deployed for that particular root user, it will try to set a password what I specified here. Okay, so this is the scenarios where we have to follow to inject the data as a environment through environment variables. Okay, instead of storing it in a file, I will be using as environment variables. Okay, now let us see how we can do this. I will take a simple example of MySQL and I will show you this. Okay, we already did this particular task of MySQL in the Docker session, right? Same thing we are trying to do it, but here how to write your environment variable is we are writing as env. There we used to give -e option when you're trying to create a Docker container, right? But here we are writing as env. You need to write your variable name as name and the value which you want to store here. Okay, that is what. Here also you can see here for my pod name, he's getting the data. You can see value from field reference, field path. So when you're writing here, no need to use a downward API. We are not using at all. It is because we are using a volume type of thing. So that's the reason we are using this particular downward API. So when you want to call through environment variables, you can just write value from. Value in the sense you will hard code. For hard coded things, you need to just write value. But when you're trying to pick from somewhere, we need to write value from field reference, which path. Okay, it is spec dot node name. So which means that on which node it is assigned, that particular node name will be stored into this particular variable, environment variable. Okay, so this is one of the example. First of all, let me try to show this. This will be simple, right? Let me try to show this. Then I will deploy my MySQL. Okay. Yeah. Let me explain once again about this. Ports, downward API, instead of here name, YAML, and then I want to give some name called downward API with env. Okay, now you can see here what simple thing. I'm just creating some busy box. I'm using this particular image. From this image, I want to create a container. I just want to execute this particular shell script. What is this? While true, do execute this command in a new line, print env, and env is the same. See, let us not get confused. What command I gave inside the script? Print env. This command and the env command is the same. Okay, so don't get confused. So inside the container, when the container got created, it will execute print env of your variables. You can see here, it is printing my pod name variable, my pod name, okay, my node name, my pod name, and my pod namespace. In the next line, it will print my pod IP, my pod service account. Don't think too much about what is service account or not. We are just trying to print. And after sleeping for 10 seconds, again this particular script will get executed. But here, if you see, we are giving a restart policy as never. Never in the sense, once a task has been done successfully, this pod will get into a completed state. Okay. So how you are trying to inject the data into the environment variables? This is hard-coded environment variable. Okay. And these are nothing but dynamic environment variables, which means that they are trying to pick the value once the pod has been created. Okay, these are the dynamic values. You can see here always your environment variables will be in capital letters. Okay, that's how it is. Okay, and the field reference and the field path, you can see under metadata I'm trying to pick namespace. This will be known once your pod is got created, so that from there it will try to pick it. Here also the service account. By default, every pod will have a service account. That service account name will be picked here. Okay. Now name will be default. Okay. I can guess and I can let you know. Okay. Because I already have some idea. So the default service account name is default. Okay. So that will be get picked by your pod. Every pod. Okay. Until unless you specify some name. Okay. We have a separate topic for that, but let's see. Now if I try to create this, I can have pods download API env.yaml. Now this pod has been created. So kubectl get pod -o wide. Okay, you can say it's running. Maybe since I gave okay, I gave this particular path now. Okay, so now here what I'm trying to do is nothing but let's try to pick this particular pod IP, and if I try to call I don't get anything. Why? Because it's not an Nginx application or something, right? It is just I have told that in the logs of my pod, if I try to see the logs of my pod, I need to see that information what it is getting printed with the shell script, right? That is what I need to see. So how will you see that? kubectl logs, sorry, kubectl kubectl logs in the pod name. Okay, here I have only one container, so no need to specify from which container we are trying to pick the logs. If it is multiple containers, then you have to specify from which container you want the logs. You can see here, for every 10 seconds, it is keep on printing your node name, pod name, namespace, IP address, and you can see. Is IP address is the same? What you have seen? It's correct. You can see 168.101.110. So which is same what you are seeing here. Okay, so which is successfully picking the data from that. Okay, so this is how it is. Okay, in this way if you want to pick the data, then we have a concept called downward API. Okay, so downward API is something where it will try to pick your pod related information dynamically, and it will inject the data into your containers. Wherever you want you can store. Either you can store it as environment variables, or you can save it in the form of files. Okay, if you want to save it in the form of files inside the container, you have to use a volume section. Okay, if it is through environment variables, then no need to write a volume section. Directly we can use value from in the environment variables. Okay, so it will change based on the concept how you are trying to call it. Okay, just try to understand based on how you are trying to call it. Based on that scenario, this particular how you will try to pull the data will get changed. If it is saving the data, try to put it in the volume section. If it is through environment variables, try to write it in the environment variable itself. Okay, so that's a simple concept which I just want to say. So this is about downward API. Okay, so the next concept is nothing but how will
Sandeep,
you.
I
Yeah.
have a question about this. So, I am not able to understand the first example. Means, okay,
Hmm.
I have a value and I am injecting into a file, then what would be the use case? If I can place that value into a particular means particular line or whatever, means it's usable. I understand the second example, it's well understood, and the use case is very clear, but it's a little
The
bit
first one, right?
confusing.
This one you are
Yeah,
talking about.
yeah.
Okay. Let's say there is an application. Okay. For that
Hmm.
application, in the configuration file or somewhere, we have to hard code some particular, we have to inject some particular data. Okay. If it is a normal virtual machines or a bare metal servers, we could have did it. Why? Because we'll set some host name. That host name will be constant, or if you reassign the host name also, it will be the same name. Or let's say the IP address, every time that particular node, you will try to assign the same IP address. Okay,
Hmm.
these are some scenarios where the values are constant, they doesn't change. But when you are coming into the containerization world, okay, these containers are ephemeral. You never know when this particular containers will get recreated, or something, if something goes wrong, this containers also will get recreated. In those scenarios, the problem is, since it is a direct pod, that's fine. Okay, let's take a simple example. In one of the configuration file, if I don't update the IP address of the container, or container in the sense the pod IP address also, because they are running in the same namespace. Okay, so I can also give a pod IP address. So if I don't give that, my applications will not get started. That is a major problem,
Yeah,
because
I
the
understand,
data is
but
yeah.
but in this example, what we are doing, we are just placing one value, metadata dot name,
Simple.
and it is
See,
replacing all the content, the previous
no,
all the contents.
yeah, obviously, it's something, right? You are overwriting the data. Okay, the concept is whatever the data is exist here will get collapsed, and the whatever the data you have written will get added here. Okay, it is not appending the data; it is like overriding the data. If you want to append the data, then the logic has to be changed. You have to write some particular command over here. Okay, some CMD and arguments. You have to write that. Okay, but here what we are trying to expect is nothing but, I want my node pod name should be added into that particular index.html, which means that if someone is trying to access my application, they have to see my pod name displayed in the terminal.
Can I
That's how it is.
concatenate? Can I concatenate any string with this metadata dot name?
Yes, of course. Why not? You can just write a cmd here, cmd argument, and then you can write your echo command to inject some data with your node name or pod name, whatever you want. Then you can follow this approach. Now, why to call it as a volume? Call it as environment variable, write your script to update the data into that index.html with whatever data you want. Echo my pod name is, and your brackets you need to write that variable name. That's it. Simple.
Mhm. Okay, thank you.
You got it or still confused? Let me know so that I can reframe it again.
No, no, actually, I am not able to understand the use case of the first
See,
example,
that's
because
what
we
that's
are
what I'm talking
replacing the
about, the
whole
use case.
content with only single value.
No, no,
Mhm.
no. See, it's not a single value. Just I gave a simple example so that in the new topic it will be able to you will be able to understand about this particular concept. Here the scenario is simple. If you
Mhm.
want to store some data into a file in the container, okay, wherever you are trying to mount it, one way is to do through downward API. You can add the data of your pod into this particular containers files using this particular approach. To explain that, I have given this simple example of adding the data. Okay, this example is related to env, which you have already understood. Now if you
Yeah.
scroll down a bit, okay, here if you see, we under this particular directory we are creating multiple files. Okay, if you see here, I have written some shell script. What is that? Let's try to understand. Here we have written the command, we are using a normal shell, and here while true do, first it is verifying whether the file is exist or not. Okay, if it is exist, if it is not exist, okay, it is trying, sorry, if it is exist, e in the sense exist, okay, then echo, try to print the data what you have stored under this particular file. What is the file name? Labels. In this particular labels, I want to store the labels of my pod. Then you can see here I'm using a field reference. You can see here the items here, path, labels. Labels in the sense what? Under this particular mount path, it will create a file called labels with the name path what you have specified. Path in the sense what? It is a file which will get created under that particular directory, okay, what you have mounted, okay. So this particular file will get created. In this file, it will add the data what you get it under metadata labels. That's how it is in this file. Now after that, again it executed another if command. It is verifying the annotations file is there or not. If it is there, it is trying to print that particular output of that particular annotation. So how the annotations file will get added? In the metadata, you can see here annotations path, a file will be created with the name called annotations, and then in that particular file the data will get added as metadata.annotations. So all the annotations will get added into this particular file. So what is your approach? So it depends upon application. I cannot say that every application will have the same scenario. Applications
Mhm.
based on that scenario, if you want the information which is related to your pod, if you want your information related to your pod, then you have to use an approach called downward API. That is my intention to explain here. Okay. If you have a scenario where you want to fetch the data of your related to your own pod, then we have to use a concept called downward API. Okay. None of the parameter can give you the pod related information. Okay. So I cannot execute kubectl get pods -o YAML inside the container, right? That is
Mhm.
not the right approach. So my Kubernetes API is doing the job for me, and it is collecting the information and it is given to me whenever it is needed for me. Let's say I want a pod IP, okay, to store it in my configuration file, or I want some particular know a pod name so that I can add it in my index.html. Okay, so in the real time, the scenarios will be most of the cases you need a pod IP address to add it in your configuration file. Okay, because some particular applications you will try to communicate, right? For that, you have to tell what is your pod IP address, your container IP address, something like that. So in those scenarios, we have to add the IP somewhere in the configuration file. So how will you add it? Will you every time hard code it? Will you write in a Docker file? No, right? So this is the approach we have to inject those kind of data dynamically inside your container. If the pod is recreated also, my IP address will get updated with a new IP address in the container. So that is a benefit I get out of this particular downward API concept in the volume section. Okay, volume
Mhm.
or whatever the section it is. Okay,
Thank you. Now it's clear.
yeah. So this is all about downward API. So in the pod, we can add different types of volumes. Now I have seen only few volumes, right? We have seen MTTR, we have seen something like downward API, and then we have seen like nothing. Apart from that, nothing we have seen actually. Then we have a concept called host path. Then we have NFS, so many like that. Okay, so let me try to explain what is host path, what is that scenario, and how it creates. Okay, let me draw a diagram. See, this pod is basic actually. Why I'm taking such a long time or so many classes to explain about pod is nothing but rest of the topics are relied on pod actually. What are the topics you learn later? Those are logically it will add some additional functionalities. But ultimately those particular concepts are also will try to create a pod. Okay, so pod is a basic to deploy your applications in a Kubernetes cluster. How you have containers as a basic, right? After that, you introduced in the Docker Swarm, we have formed a cluster using Docker Compose. It is called a service. Those are logically, it is adding some concept to that particular containers. Similarly, in Kubernetes also, pod is a basic one. Okay. Later on, whatever you learn, like static pods, sorry, stateful set, deployment, daemon set, replication controller, replica set. These are the other ways to deploy your application. But those are logically adding some advantages to your application, but those also will try to create a pod. Okay, so ultimately that is a concept. Okay, so here I just want to explain about volumes, right? So if you want to look at volumes page, you can just type it over here. You will get the official page from Kubernetes about volume. Okay. So different types of volumes are available. You can see here, we can use AWS. But here, the point which you have to remember is nothing but if you are using AWS EKS, okay, AWS EKS, Kubernetes service, then only you can use this particular approach. Okay. If you are using cloud, your environment should be in the cloud service. Kubernetes service should be Kubernetes service you have to use in the cloud. Okay, Azure, you can see Azure Disk. Okay, you can see AWS EBS. Okay, Azure. Ceph is nothing but a third-party Ceph storage, which is really useful. Though it is not my topic, actually I know about Ceph, right? CEPH, not Ceph configuration management tool. I'm not talking about Puppet, Ceph, and Ansible, those kind of configuration. Ceph is nothing but a storage. Okay, it provides all the three types of storages in single platform. Okay, it is an open source tool and which is maintained by Red Hat. Okay, what it provides: file for file system storage, block storage, and object storage. Three types of storages are provided in a single platform. If you use AWS, everybody knows about cloud, any one of the cloud, AWS or Google Cloud or Azure Cloud. Anyone doesn't have any idea about cloud?
Yeah, I
Any
have
cloud.
some idea.
Okay. Rest of the people know Gagan, Kalyani, Asif, Shefi.
Yeah, I have a little idea about
Okay.
AWS.
So in the cloud, if you want to attach some disk, right, we call it as block storage. Okay. For that block storage, you have to use a separate service. If I want to store some objects, we have S3 bucket in AWS. Okay, then we have to use S3 bucket service. And if I want to use some object storage, block storage is done, then file system. I want to use Azure file system. So for all the three types, we need to use three different services, and the billing and everything is different. But the self storage, the only thing is like we need a proper administrator to maintain this. Everything is free. It is an open source tool. It is well developed by Red Hat, and all the three types of services are provided in a single platform. That's a benefit we get. So in that, I'm talking about file system, right? Ceph also provides. So this is what is Ceph file system. It is called as Ceph Ceph file system. Okay. So that also we can integrate. Cinder is nothing but OpenStack related. OpenStack is also one of the cloud. It is an open source cloud actually. AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud are their own sub-provided clouds, right? Google by Google Cloud, it is GCP. AWS, Amazon is providing its own AWS. Microsoft is providing its own cloud platform called Azure. Now, all these three are paid versions, means you have to pay for what you have used. But if you want to build your own cloud on your own infrastructure, then we have an open source tool called OpenStack. I worked on this for 4 years. Okay, so that's the reason I have some idea. Okay, till now, till what do you say, 2 months back, I have worked on this particular OpenStack. Okay, recently I moved into Azure. So this Cinder is one of the concept like block storage. If you want to use a block storage concept, we have a Cinder service in OpenStack. Okay, so we have a CSI config map. I'll tell you this is the part
Sudhir,
of
Sudhir, I have a small question here
yes.
related to Cinder. Actually, I'm also working on OpenStack and the SAP. So my question is, if I'm using, sorry, if I'm using,
Can you take it offline because other people will get confused.
yeah, just
Don't.
one line. Okay, short,
Okay.
very short question. If I'm using SAF storage and providing, I mean, SAF is providing storage to the Cinder, and
Uh,
uh, means if I have a SAF, then why we cannot just mount volume from the SAF directly? Why we are using Cinder via
no, that's what
OpenStack?
I'm saying. For Kubernetes, if you are using Kubernetes, no, not at all needed to use OpenStack Cinder. You can directly use self storage.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's example I have. If you want to see that, let's say I created some example related to that as well. If you see OpenStack Cinder Ceph, you can see here.
Okay. Yeah.
You know about Ceph, right?
Hmm.
Yeah. We give monitoring tools. We have ultimately like high availability. We give three monitoring tool IP address, and then you can give your username of your uh, of the self storage as for authentication and the secret key read only mode. That's it. No need to use Cinder. Directly we can do this. Okay. My
Okay.
container related information now will be get stored in the Ceph file system. Okay.
Mhm. Okay, thank you. I have some use case question that I will ask later.
Okay. Okay. We can sync up. Okay. Just ping me in WhatsApp group. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
So yeah. So now this is like for every cloud or every open source cloud or paid cloud or whatever it is, for everything Kubernetes is supporting a volume type. Okay, Fabric, we have Folker. I never used it, but it is deprecated now. Okay, Folker. Now FC Fiber, Fibre channel. So we have so many things. iSCSI storage, GCE persistent disk. Okay, Google Cloud. I told you. Remember the point once again. If you are using your GCP let's say EKS or GKS or AKS, then only we can use this particular volumes. Okay, that's one thing. And then we have this same thing. Okay, Git repo. This is also deprecated actually. That's the reason I have shown a different example to pull the data from the Git repo. I've created another container, init container, then I pull the data, right? That's how it is. Now this is deprecated. No longer you cannot use Git repo concept in the volume. Okay, that's all. Cluster FS, host path we will discuss today. Okay, and then we have iSCSI storage, local storage. You can see like n number of things are supported. NFS. Okay, you can read this particular documentation. Always you can recommend to your client based on their particular storage availability. Okay, if they have their own storage, see whether that particular storage is can be integrated to your. It is already provided by Kubernetes or not. Okay, so then based on you need to start discussing with the client approaches and all. That's you have to. So always my recommendation is read the documentation of these volumes. Okay, whichever you know, go and see the examples of it. Try to study about this particular volumes. Okay, we have already seen about mtdr. Only that is the only concept what we have seen. What is the problem with that? When my pod is getting deleted, the entire data which is stored in the volume will get deleted. That's what you have seen, right? Okay, I don't want that approach. Using this volume types, is there a way that even though if I delete my pod, still I can access my data? Yes. Let's say a simple example called host path. Okay, there are some disadvantages, but still, let us see what is host path. So let me draw a diagram. Paint. Now this is my Kubernetes cluster, right? So Kubernetes cluster. Okay, in this cluster, I have some multiple nodes. Let's say this is controller node. Sorry, pick. Yeah, this is controller, and let's say this is my compute, and this is my compute. I have two computes, for example. Whole bunch. This is a cluster. Now this is called as control plane, and this is a compute plane one. Okay, and this is compute plane two. Okay, now I'm trying to deploy some particular pod. Okay, so I have written some YAML file. In that, through that particular YAML file, I'm trying to create some pod. Okay, so user is trying to create it either through YAML file. It's as a user, I'll be using either kubectl command. Okay, kubectl command either to pass YAML file create -f file. Okay, now when I execute this command, I'm trying to create a pod. Okay, so this pod is having a YAML file and it has a volume section which is related to host path. Now, your kube scheduler means your kube scheduler, which is nothing but a default scheduler which we have, right? Now this will decide on which node it should launch, right? So your once the information was given to your controller node, the controller node API server will take the information, and based on the etcd information what it has about the nodes, their information and all, it will give the information to the scheduler, and scheduler will decide based on the availability, resource availability and all, it will decide on which node it should launch. So once a decision has been made, Let's say your pod is launched on this particular node, for example. Okay, now on this particular node, your pod has been launched. Now, once it is launched here, your pod is running in this particular machine right now. Okay, your pod is running on this particular machine right now. So once it is launched, since you are using host path, what does it mean? Host is nothing but your node. Okay, on this particular host, whatever the path you have specified, for example, in this scenario, we have taken example called, let me go to the under this particular directory, volumes, where is the host path? Volumes, yeah. If you scroll down a bit, okay, here I'm using host path. Let's say this is the directory. Okay, /var /temp, and then we have nginx -data. Okay, so every node will have /var /temp actually. Under that, I'm trying to create nginx -data. Okay, so which means that on this particular node, var /temp /nginx -data data. Now this directory will get created. Okay, let's say even though if this directory is not there, nginx-data, it can create it. How is that possible? You can see the type, directory or create. What does it mean? If Kubernetes will see whether that directory is there or not. If not, it will create it. Okay, if you specify this parameter, there are so many types which we can specify. Next parameter is directory. Directory in the sense it has to be exist as a prerequisite. Okay, if that is not available, it will fail. Okay, that is second scenario. File or create in the sense if you are trying to mount a file or create in the file is not available, it will create it. File in the sense if it is file is not available, it will fail. Okay, socket file. Okay, character device, and then block device in the sense /dev/sda, your disk related files, floppy disk or hard disk or whatever it is. Okay, character device and socket files. If you are trying to mount a socket files, if that socket file should be available, you cannot create it. That's a problem. So that's the reason here you don't see socket or create, character or create, okay, block device or create. Why? Because these cannot be created. Okay, this cannot be created, this should be existing. So that's the reason you don't see that. Okay, for directories and files, it is our own preference. So that's the reason we can create. It's file system related operations which you are doing, so that we can create it. Okay, okay, that's one thing. Now I'm using this parameter so that if this directory is not available on that particular host, I'm trying to create it. Okay, that is the thing which I'm trying to do it. This is my sleep command which we are trying to add, and for 200, which means that this particular directory is getting mounted to here, this particular container, and well as this particular container. Okay, in this container, instead of writing sleep command, I can just add some data as well. Okay, so like this, instead of writing like that, let me add this. Okay, let me copy this so that it will inject some data, right? So that's the reason. Copy, instead of writing here, I will comment on this. So here what I'm trying to do is under this path nginx-data, I'll be creating a file echo. I'm injecting the data called index.html in this particular file. Okay, so this directory is getting mounted and here it is getting added. Okay, so this is well and good. Yeah, nginx data. So var temp nginx data. Okay, yeah, this is fine. So now, simple. One pod is trying to add some index.html under this particular directory, and this directory, okay, sorry. Here I no need to write this one because it is my container, right? My mistake. Okay. So it is creating index.html in the inside the container, and it is adding some data called date command output into this particular file. Okay, for every 10 seconds, this will get repeated. Whatever the index.html is available, now this will be available under the host on whichever node it is launched, right? On that particular host, it will have this index.html created. Now this will be utilized by your uh, this particular container. Okay, so that is what it is trying to do. Now let's try to do this. Then I will explain what are the advantages and what are the disadvantages. We have disadvantages as well. Let me explain. So as per this particular diagram, Now this particular directory should be created on the node which it got launched, okay, wherever the pod is running. So let me try to create this. I'll create one more directory called mkdir volumes. Okay, so volumes, then I'm using host path, but YAML example related to host path. Okay, so now let's try to create this. Before that, let me do a cleanup of my all the data which I have. kubectl delete -f. I have so many things got created actually. I just need to remove. This is creating unnecessary confusion. So this is a simple command. I have so many YAML files present under this particular directory. All the YAML files I am trying to apply to delete the resources. Okay, that is what it is trying to do. Simple command, right? Now this is called as manifest directory. Manifest in the sense a bunch of YAML files which is present in a directory is called as manifest directory. Let it get completed.
So the
Yeah,
repo that we are using, do you have
yeah,
all the contents uploaded to the GitHub, or you are
yeah,
selecting
of
it and then
course.
uploading?
No. Every time this will get uploaded. Okay, this is uploaded into the repository. The only thing is like I will select an example based on the topic which we are discussing. Okay, you have so many examples here. Okay,
Yeah, when
I've
you
written
say
in a
that,
single.
you know the directory called 02 pods, we don't see that in
Yeah,
the report.
no, I pushed it. You can see now. Can you refresh it?
Okay, I'll check it later. No?
Yeah, because yesterday night I pushed it. Okay,
Oh, okay.
that's the reason today when you logged in, I just explained that the directory section has been changed. Okay, so that everybody will not get confused. Yeah, this got deleted. Now kubectl, what pods I have right now? Let's see. If not, I will delete the rest of the pods. Okay, these are still running. Okay, let me try to delete this one as well. Delete, deploy. So don't think too much about this. It's pods which I've created. Okay, I'm just trying to do a cleanup. So test pod and the pods are getting created. Okay. So tomorrow we'll discuss about disadvantages. Today let me show you how this host path will get created. Okay, because we are running almost, we reached the end of the session. So are you people are able to understand the concepts or you are not able to catch the topics? Please let me know. Okay, so don't go through the end and then make a note of to me actually. Okay, if you tell me here itself so that I can reframe it or I can repeat the topic whatever we were discussing or the previous class what we have discussed, I can repeat once again. No problem at all. Okay, so yeah, now let me create. So kubectl get, sorry, kubectl create -f. Okay, and then my YAML file. So volumes, I have this host path, right? So kubectl get pod -o wide. Let's see. Now you can see this pod is up and running. You can see all the two containers are in ready state. Now if I try to access this, let's see what will happen. We got a forbidden. Why? Because the directory which I have mounted is an empty directory which got created, I guess. Okay, maybe that's a problem. I can just fix it. But here you can see you got a response like it is nginx 1.21.1 as per the latest image. Okay. The only thing is whatever the index.html file I'm looking for, it is not available. Okay. That's the only issue we have right now. But here the concept is there has to be a directory created, right? Where this got created on the host, it is created on the host called compute plane 1. Where my pod is launched on that particular node, you have to see. So if I go to my compute plane, okay, and then Let me show the path. So what is the path? /var/temp. Under that I have nginx-data directory, right? It is not created by me, so automatically this should be available, right? So let's see. Since we gave a parameter type called directory or create, so sudo space -i. What is the path? How will you verify first? df-h command. If you execute actually, you will see the path, but you don't see that particular path got mounted for the pod. Okay. So what is your pod ID? Let's get that. Okay. So if I again see this kubectl get pod, what is the pod name? Nginx -pod -o YAML. You can see your ID. There is ID. Get this. Okay. Go to your compute plane. Just I'm trying to show. Okay. Let me expand this. If I give df-h command, grep, this one you can see here. What it is trying to show you, it is showing you that it is pod and then we have projected. Okay. You don't have anything related to that particular volume information, maybe because this is not available. Okay. If you try to take this and if you look at your volumes right now, what you have only one directory. So where is my data stored? If it is empty dir, it is in this particular path, but now I don't see any data which is available. Though I defined my volume section, it is not here because we are using host path in the sense what on the host the path is this particular location what we have told. So slash vi, what is a path? Where temp directory, if you see, this directory got created. Did I create it? No. This was created automatically by your Kubernetes API. Okay, it has created, which is nothing but your kubelet service on this particular node. And then you can see index, actually index.html is available, but it created another directory called html dot here. Okay, the problem is in the YAML file, I gave this particular subpath. I could have deleted this. Okay, so once I delete this, then this particular approach what I've told will work. Okay, simple thing is just what we can do, delete this one subpath. Okay, so what you can do in your YAML file is, again you can open your YAML file. Now to reapply this, remove this. Okay, how we can recreate? As I told you in the last session, kubectl replace, okay, -f force -f path of your YAML file. What is a path? Forcefully I'm recreating it. Okay, -f path is volumes and this one. The pod will get deleted and it will get replaced. Now, can someone tell me what will happen? What will happen to the host? Though the pod got deleted, your directory will be available. You can see this actually. See, the directory is still available. Why? Because even though the pod is deleted, which is getting deleted actually, the directory will still available. Okay, so this is what you have to remember. That is the intention of using this particular volume. But there is a slight problem. Can anyone guess what could be the problem? What is the disadvantages of this?
If this pod will reschedule into another node, then
Yes,
this data will not be available there.
exactly. So, which means that if this pod is scheduled to this particular node, for example, though I don't have another node, let's say if it is attached to this particular node, now again a new directory will get created and the new data will get injected. What will happen to the old data which I stored in this particular node? So that's a problem. Okay. To overcome this disadvantage also, we have a concept called scheduling. Scheduling in Kubernetes, which means that I can tell to my pod that always go and launch into this particular node. I can do that actually. Okay. Still, I can control saying that my pod has to be launched only to the node every time, only to this particular node. So that if you are using host path also, it doesn't create any problem, right? So that is a disadvantage, but to overcome that, we have a concept called scheduling. Okay, we can use node name, node selector. We have node affinity. So these are the three different types we have, which can be used. So that's the reason I gave a heading called scheduling. So through that particular concept, we can control that this pod has to be launched only on that particular node. Okay. Yes, that's one thing. Okay, I hope this is done. Yeah. So kubectl get pod hyphen o wide. Just 2 minutes. I'll wind up today. First, I just want to execute this curl command. Okay. You can see now the data is available. Okay. So this will get updated for every 10 seconds. Okay. So this is how it is. So
This
did
is
you
the same
understand?
case. This is the case with the volume mount as well, right? For example, I'm asking, there is a, I am running a MySQL pod, okay, and compute plane 2, and
Hmm.
I have mounted the volume to a path here. So suppose later, if the queue pod is scheduled to run on compute plane 1, that
Hmm.
volume will be available only in compute plane 2, right? It will not be there in
Yes,
1, isn't it?
exactly. That's the reason it is host path. Host path in the sense the path is only specific to that particular host. Okay.
Okay, so I'm asking, so in a real-time case, when you try to run a MySQL pod, you
Hmm.
always run in on a particular node only all the time?
Yes, using, but instead of running on a particular node, it depends. If I have a specific resources, high-end resources onto a node, I will ensure that my MySQL application, which is like a huge database, I want to
Hmm.
ensure that it is running on a proper resources node, right? So then I will
Uh,
schedule only on that particular node. In those scenarios, you can use this one, but for those kind of applications, right? It is a stateful set application. Okay. For a stateful
okay,
set
so that
application, we can use a
hmm.
stateful set approach to create a pod. Okay.
So that is a coming section, right? I think.
Yes, yes, it is in coming
Yeah.
session.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
for those kind of applications, you have to use that particular approach. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. So as per your knowledge, like as per the knowledge which we have right now, let's say we are in the same platform. For example, as per the knowledge we have, this is the only chance we have. Through scheduling, I can ensure that the pod can be launched only on that particular node. Okay. But here there is a slight disadvantage. If this node is down due to some reason, disk crash or something like that, this pod will never get rescheduled onto any other node. Okay. That's a major problem we have. That is the last scenario of a failure. Okay. Everybody understood this concept because these are important actually in Kubernetes. Okay, you understood, right? What is host path and how it works and what is a disadvantage and how to overcome that. Okay, yeah. Let me know when you're practicing it. If you have any questions, just let me know. Okay, thank you. Yeah. No questions. Okay, thank you.